Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the journey of Mars, the planet of action and assertion, through the practical and precise sign of Virgo. It begins on June the 17th through to August the 6th. But there's a supreme irony because Mars is going to get back into its usual routine, something the sign of Virgo has a strong appreciation for. What do I mean? Well, on the 4th of September last year, Mars made his way into the feeling sign of Cancer, where he does not like being. Mars in Cancer is in its fall, and through two spells of a total of 15 weeks, then went through the subsequent sign of Leo for a total of 17 weeks, again twice, because of its every 2.5 year cycle of retrograde. That retrograde began on the 6th of December, went on through to the 24th of February. But what did happen through that journey of Mars is that he went exactly opposite to the position of Pluto on the 3rd of November, when both planets were on the anaretic degrees. So Mars was in Cancer at 29 and Pluto in Capricorn at 29. Then again that opposition was repeated on the 3rd of January, and when Mars returned back into Aries on the 18th of April, once more by the 27th of April they were clashing once more. And that's one of astrology's most challenging influences, because Mars and Pluto are the co-regents of the other sign that Mars rules, beyond Aries, of Scorpio. Very deep, very intense, and very much in its own way about confrontation. So what we've got in the world at the present time is, it seems, a very triggered environment, a lot of intolerance, a lot of impatience, a lot of desire for certain people to dominate other people. So the genesis of where we are now, I feel, can be traced back to the beginning of September last year. So what can we expect from Mars going through Virgo? I'm going to share the archetypes of Mars through its rulership of Aries, of Scorpio, of what we can expect in the sign of Virgo. I'm also going to share the event charts from a natal perspective to give us a much greater understanding of what that next 6-week period is going to be like. But please stay with me to the end, because I'll then explore each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. Thank you so much for joining me, Patrick Arundell. If you're new to my channel, a warm welcome. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. I have now got a membership scheme, and I have got some members. Thank you so much for those people who are supporting the channel. Thanks too to my Patreons. If you'd like to become a member or a patron, please check out the links below for more. Also, if you'd like to visit my new website at patrickarundell.com, it's packed full of extra information. My website's been going for 24 years now, but you can read your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general horoscopes, love horoscopes, Vedic horoscopes, but also enjoy my stunning 3-card tarot. It's absolutely brilliant, if I say so myself. If you'd like to talk to me one-to-one, I'd be delighted. Please check out my testimonials below. And also, with year 2025 absolutely speeding by, if you would like to order your forecast for year 2026, totally unique to you, if you do so now, I'll give you the rest of this year free, but also you'll get your life roadmap report. That's the most searing document any of us can ever read, because it helps us to understand the patterns that are played out in our lives so far. Please see below for more. You can get 30% off too. So on the 17th of June at 8:36 AM Universal, based on Greenwich, we have Mars moving into Virgo. Now let's just think about the archetypes of Mars. So Mars in Aries, very much about being fresh, getting on the front foot, seizing the moment, not analysing things too much. It's about taking action in a very direct, thrusting and exciting way. Wow, Mars really is a fantastic planet. We can really benefit from Mars. And Mars in Aries helps to get things moving. But it can be somewhat impatient, maybe even a tad intolerant. If it encounters obstacles, it gets overwhelmed with that frustration, which can trigger irritation and, at the worst, obviously aggression, because Mars is the planet of war. And what we've had, which accumulated on the 15th of June, is a clash that's been building up with Uranus, which peaked when the two cycles between them came together again. The last time this occurred was on the 16th of May 2018. Another irony, Mars had just entered the sign of Aquarius. So very much there, Mars is about perhaps being more conscious of our collective energy, but Mars in Leo is much more about the individual. It can be very much about ego, and it can be very much about pride and not taking a backward step. Uranus, very much to do with sudden electric energy, can be to do with innovation, but it too can be very igniting and abrasive, particularly in the right angle with Mars. So we've come out of a weekend where things just feel very uncertain, very unpredictable, very tense, very dangerous, and it's a very, very important time for us all collectively. Now Mars, through its rulership of Scorpio, is more complex. It can be about gratification. Now we could say through the Aries energy a more instant gratification, but if you think about Scorpionic energy, it can be about intimacy, sex. It can also be about domination. It can also be about transformation. It can also be about perhaps possessiveness, jealousy. It can also be about, together with Pluto, the ruler of the sign of Scorpio, about where we may use our power in a silent or hidden way that's leveraged, that somehow has a control over other people. So Mars definitely has its shadow side. Now, its positive side through the sign of Scorpio is an appetite for transformation and also enjoying taking on challenges, meeting obstacles, transforming ourselves through those tests, and that's something to behold too. However, as Mars moves into Virgo, it's not going to be a panacea. Mars in Virgo is good in the sense that Mars's desire for the attention in Leo is replaced by a desire to use thrust and energy for the good of others, because Mars in Virgo can be very much about being of service. The type of people who have Mars in Virgo can be surgeons, the need for very detailed concentration, forensic attention, but using the energy, the drive to perhaps operate on someone. But it could be someone who is a very skilled machinist or engineer, or it could be someone who is a brilliant maker or creator, whether it's through needlework, that attention to detail. And Mars, of course, is about passion, so we can use that meticulousness in a way that gives a creative outcome. But what Virgo energy likes, like all earth signs, is something productive but also tangible to come out of the effort, and Mars is definitely about effort and drive. So what we can do is use our physical vitality in a more efficient way. We can be more economical about how we use our energy. We can be less caught up about what people think about us, Mars in Leo, or even showing off, and more concerned with taking the brilliant idea we generated in Leo, but actually making it come to life in a tangible way. Now, going about that requires Mars to slow down a little bit, be a little bit less in a rush, take time to go through the processes in a methodical manner. But what you can get with Mars in Virgo is an irritability if things aren't quite so. So that's something we all need to be conscious of over these next 6 weeks. What we can all do collectively, particularly as more and more information is coming into the public domain about what we eat and drink and all the different things that are added to what we eat and drink in not a positive way, we can be more conscious of the virtue of Virgo. And the drive of Mars can give us quite an incentive to get a little bit more exercise in, to perhaps change 10 things in our lives by 2.5%, and that adds up to a major shift if we focus enough to concentrate on reading labels, taking more care with food preparation, cooking things from scratch. The sign of Virgo is about virtue. And of course, Mars can be about desire, so it doesn't sound as sexy, but one of the things we could do if we're not enjoying our work is look for a job that gives us more personal satisfaction, where we do something that we do well, but it also helps another person. So often people with Mars in Virgo work in service industries. It could be food distribution, it could be in healthcare, because that attention to detail, but that desire to assist and oil the wheels of how we're all connected is very much to the fore. Now, Mars is a sign which can be combative, of course. So if we do encounter inefficiencies, that in itself could be something that triggers us to do something about it. Now, what I'm going to do is share the two event charts, because I feel by doing that we get much more context of how this particular transit will go. But what I just want to do is revisit the oppositions that happen between Mars and Pluto. So on November the 3rd, on the analytic degree, we had Mars in the sign of Cancer in an opposition with Pluto in its last flush through the sign of Capricorn in our lifetimes. And that analytic degree is really interesting, because Pluto through the sign of Capricorn perhaps was where we became collectively very caught up in the material world. Whereas Mars in Cancer perhaps was asking us, perhaps not always in a particularly pleasant or even way, to become much more conscious about how things felt. But Mars in the sign of Cancer can feel like it's losing its energy. But what we can find is that people can be very personal in the way that they use the aggression of Mars. And because Mars and Pluto is a very highly charged aspect and very much to do with the domination that I was talking about with Mars in Scorpio, unfortunately, we've seen dominating type energy start to come in over these last 32 weeks in a very unpleasant way for the large part. Now, of course, when the retrograde began, which was the 6th of December, that was slowing things down, but it was in Leo. But then we had a repetition of the opposition, but this time between Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius, but they were both within the first, well, they were both in the first degree of each sign. So in terms of Indian astrology and using dwarves, the 12th harmonic, there was a double resonance of the we of Aquarius and the me of Leo. So we v me, it's a big theme going on in our society at the present time. So it's okay for those who are the me's and are comfortably off. It's not so okay for the we's who may be at the other end of things. And then when Mars came out of went back into Cancer on the 6th of January and came out of the retrograde on the 24th of February, but returned back into Leo on the 18th of April. And then we had a repetition, this time at 3 degrees, between Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. So that me, v, we. So that's a theme that's been developing, a right is might attitude, because Pluto is the planet which affects us all collectively. The sign of Aquarius is how we are all connected through our network. It can be to do with our higher values. It can be to do with the best of us. but we've also seen Pluto influence a lot to do with technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, and that in some ways is having such fundamental effects on us. It's affecting us collectively, and maybe our identity, Mars, is also being influenced by that. So there's a lot of build-up of pressure and uncertainty, along with the financial uncertainty that's been bubbling away ever since Uranus moved into Taurus on the 15th of May 2018 for its first 5-month visit, but clashed immediately on the 16th with Mars, guess what, in the sign of the people of Aquarius. So what we're seeing is a big shift which has been accelerated by Saturn moving into its fall in Aries along with Neptune. So Saturn with Neptune can affect our physical vitality. We all need to really look after ourselves, and because we are finding more about what's in water, you know, the microplastics that are everywhere, the amount of chemicals that are in foods, the amount of stabilizers and emulsifiers and all these things, however sexily foods are promoted, there is nothing like food grown from scratch that we get locally, that if we can afford it or get it organic, we cook it ourselves, we grow it ourselves. That's what the opportunity of Mars in Virgo gives us, to get a little bit more control, to protect ourselves, because while Saturn is in Aries through to the end of August and in a conjunction with Neptune, I feel that physical vitality collectively will be lower. It could even be almost like an emotional vitality is lower. So we need to use the virtue of Mars marching into Virgo to our best defense, because Mars can be about defense. But let's have a look at the natal chart from a Placidus viewpoint. On the screen now is the natal chart from a Placidus perspective, with the ascendant in Leo at 21 degrees. I base my charts on Greenwich at universal time because of the prime meridian, not because I'm based in the UK, but because I feel we can all collectively relate to this. This event chart, just a few features I want to pick out for you. Ironically, Mars is in the first house, so it's really encouraging us to be mindful of what we want as individuals. But it does clash with Uranus still. So Uranus is on the anaretic degree of the sign of Taurus, but they're still in that very abrasive right angle. So over the next 6 weeks, we just need to be mindful that whatever we want to do as individuals, Mars in the first house, even if we want to get into the process of purity, Virgo, that Uranus in the 10th house, that's the big picture of the world at large, it does suggest the world's going to retain a rather turbulent dimension. Now, if you look at Mars, the position of Neptune, Saturn and Pluto, Mars is actually the finger of God in a yod. And the interesting thing here is that Mars really encourages us to do what we need to do as individuals. Please stay with me as I go through each of the zodiac signs to give you a feel of what you can expect over these next 6 weeks. So Aries, your ruler making its way into your 6th house, definitely an opportunity to think about refinements. But because of the energy of Saturn and Neptune in your sign, I wouldn't give yourself too much of a to-do list to do over the next 6 weeks. I actually feel that you should think about your priorities. Everybody's priorities are different. 6th house energy, to be honest, isn't uber sexy. It is much more practical. So if you think about some of the elements of your situation that have lost a little bit of traction, where you could perhaps be a little bit more careful, you could go for those in a steady and applied way, Saturn and Neptune in your sign, but also give yourself some achievable targets. But if there are other things you can still do to enjoy yourself, particularly with Venus currently in your second house, so enjoying the good things in life, you don't want to neglect that to the point that you're living like the proverbial monk, but life then feels very dull and rather restrictive. But one thing you can do, I feel, with the combination of the energy developing in Cancer with Mars in Virgo, is to make some changes to your physical space. So if there have been some do-it-yourself tasks that have been put off, you want to amend your home in some manner, refine it, decorate it, all of those things could actually be very good for your sense of well-being. But the sixth house is a little bit steady Eddie. It is about those details. Another thing that could come up for you is if you're not feeling particularly satisfied or inspired by your work. And Mars here could give you a little bit more thrust to perhaps think about the type of different options that you could pursue. You may be able to continue to do exactly the same type of work, but perhaps in a different setting, work with a different set of people, because the sixth house position of Mars is probably going to flag up where you don't feel quite so satisfied. So it's important to create the energy to make some changes, but I wouldn't be too caught up in the details. Be productive about home, look after yourself, but also give yourself permission to have some fun too. So Taurus, as Mars makes his way into your fifth house, an area where he can really shine for you, he's really asking you to manifest your talents, but also have maximum self-belief in your sense of gorgeousness. The fifth house is where we can radiate extra charisma. It's just that with Saturn and Neptune trapped into a very psychological part of your situation, if you do have some self-doubts that are rattling around in the depths of your being, this is an opportunity to try to address those. The great thing is that with Jupiter applying to Mars, if you need to talk to someone or think about these strands, this would be a good time to do so. Now, although Uranus is still in your sign, it's so late, it does start this process in a square with Mars. So if you're in a romantic relationship that isn't going so well, or you feel that there is an undercurrent, or you don't feel that a partner is quite as open, maybe there's a sense that they're keeping things back from you, or you're not quite sure of all their activities, that's something that actually could be quite undermining. And I think with the Sun moving into your third house, joining up with Jupiter soon after Mars moves into the sign of Virgo, important to make connections to the people that you feel very sure of. And you could find yourself getting in touch with someone from your past. There may even be someone who gets in touch with you. And if you do get the opportunity to just get out and about and mix and mingle more, I think it's going to be very good for your sense of self. Now, Venus is in your sign. As Mars moves forwards and they align, that's going to be an opportunity, if you're single, to perhaps connect with someone. But whatever's going on in the deeper part of your nature with Saturn and Neptune in your 12th house, it is important to keep working at perhaps your shadow side, because that's going to release you to really glow in the here and now in an extremely positive way. So Gemini, Mars making its way into your fourth house can give you a sense of greater urgency if you're living somewhere that you're not enjoying. So that can make you much more proactive. But also if you want to adapt your current accommodation, Mars here can be helpful. It could also give you the extra impulse to connect with contractors who could perhaps come in and make some changes for you. But Mars in the fourth house can be a bit prickly, and of course the sign of Virgo can be a little bit perfectionist. So when it comes to family and emotional situations, it is going to be important to just be aware of the tendency with Mars in the fourth house to be a bit defensive, to be a bit triggered, to react to things in quite a fast way, which can be a little bit of your nature anyway. Now, Saturn and Neptune are in your sector of friendship. If there are certain friendships, as much as you like someone, that you're wanting a little bit more from those alliances, you may become a little bit more conscious if that's not developing in the weeks to come. So as much as you can be very much a social creature, with Jupiter in your second house to be joined by the Sun on the 21st, what you are looking for is a greater sense of your values being enriched. So Mars linking back to Jupiter is very much about that. If you are very close to your family or people that form the inner part of your circle, there could be some mutual activities there where you help each other. And for some Geminis, if you're not doing it already, the desire to develop a home-based business, perhaps a hobby you have at the moment, into something more tangible could also be part of the story over the next 6 weeks. So Cancer, Mars moving into your third house is very much about an impulse to be more active. The third house can also be about short journeys, so you may find yourself actually being more on the move. But the third house can also make it more difficult with Mars in the mix to sit still. You may physically want to do more, which of course you can turn into a positive. The sign of Virgo, very much about that virtue. So if you do want to up your activities, it's a very fine time to do it. But because Jupiter in your sign is linking so productively to Mars, anything that you're very invested in terms of your individual talent or ideas, and particularly once the Sun joins you on the summer solstice, and it too is linking very productively to Mars, as you enter into the latter parts of this month, you're going to find that things are really starting to speed up, and that can be very exciting. Now, if you are someone who's got something you want to say or express, maybe it is through an app, maybe through a blog, maybe it's because you want to join in more with local community activities, the chance to take a more central role is definitely there. Remember, Mars is about thrust. The third house can be about quick exchanges and movement, but definitely excitement. So all in all, Cancer, you're entering a time which is going to be seeing you very much more on the front foot, but also at the centre of the action. So Leo, planetary transitions tell part of a bigger story. So if we wind back to the start of September, there may have been an idea that started to germinate in the back of your mind that you started to research and plan. You may have put it into process with the first visit of Mars into your sign. It may have stumbled a bit. You may have had to make some adaptations, but once Mars burst back into Leo in mid-April, you've had a chance to really focus on that plan, refine it, but also feel much more invested and passionate about it. And if you've been putting all of your energy into that in a very concentrated way since then, the chances are in the next 6 weeks, you're going to see the tangible results. So a very exciting transition. In a more practical way for Leo people, Mars moving into the second house can give you a greater desire to improve your income. Now, that income could be in an existing role. So for example, if you feel you could do better working for another employer, because Virgo can be about work, this would be a time when you can find an extra inner spark to take the steps forwards. But of course, you do have Saturn and also Neptune in the 9th house. If there are constraints around your situation, for example, if you're drawn to a job but it's not in your vicinity, or perhaps you have to work remotely, which doesn't quite work for you, or perhaps that does work for you but the job you want doesn't offer that, there could be some of those inhibitions that are going to show up. But if you're really open to be flexible, there is a big chance over these next few weeks to really improve the amount of money you're earning. But most of all, increase your tenacity and determination to squeeze more from your budget as it is now. So Virgo, I'm absolutely delighted that Mars is arriving in your sign, because to be honest, having Mars in the 12th house for 17 long weeks, and some of those in retrograde, is really not easy. You may have found out, unfortunately, who some fair weather friends have been. You may have also become much more aware of some of your vulnerabilities. You may have been conscious that issues from your past, scenarios that played out that you thought you'd come to terms with, have actually still had some energy still active deep within your subconscious. So Mars moving into your sign is definitely something to celebrate. But we have to be aware that in terms of the natal astrology, with Uranus so late in the sign of Taurus, your sister Earth sign, it is possible that if you're working in a situation where you want to be more yourself, you want to be more individual, you want to come out of the shadows, well, Jupiter is certainly going to help you in its association with Mars, helping to think about your long-term future. But if you work somewhere that really cramps your style and isn't really letting you demonstrate your individuality, you may find over the next 6 weeks that even if your inclination is to stick with what you know, the patterns that give you a sense of familiarity and comfort, this may truly be the time to start afresh. Libra, for you, there's somewhat of a celestial paradox because Jupiter's moved into the most visible part of your chart, very much to do with success and connects into influential people, but Mars dives deep into the most private areas, but they are collaborating. How's that going to work out? Well, I think it's possible when it comes to your career. It's sometimes a case of the tactics as much as the desire. So you could find yourself doing some research. You may find yourself doing some confidential soundings. You may link back to someone influential from your past who perhaps can give you some good advice. Because as we know, it's often who as much as what we know that's important. But once the Sun joins up with Jupiter on the 21st and itself links back to Mars, this need to balance the psychological with the more visible is going to be an ongoing trend. How will you make this work for you? Well, I feel that it could be in some ways to do with subtlety, because with having Saturn and Neptune in your opposite sign, they're really asking you to be very serious about who you're going to connect with. And perhaps Mars in the 12th house can also expand upon or amplify the need to be careful about the pledges you make professionally. Sometimes we can get a job because we interview well and the people interviewing us may really like us, but that doesn't necessarily mean the job itself is always right for us. So don't try too hard. Stay in touch with how you truly feel deeper down, because even if you are given the chance to gain greater recognition, it needs to be in the right way. So listening to your inner voice will be important to your progress over the next few weeks. Finally, Mars in the 12th house can stir up the sediment that's lain deep within us, sometimes the things that we think that we've dealt with. You have a great skill of keeping quite an implacable mask. You know, people see you as being someone who's very much in control and keeping that even keel. But if there is some outstanding issues that perhaps you haven't quite sorted through, certainly take those seriously over the next 6 weeks. Otherwise, you could find at times that your mood is a little bit up and down. Scorpio, when Mars moves, it's a big news story for you in particular, being your traditional ruler. And the sign of Virgo can be about working together with people. If you are in an environment where it's very much a team ethic, that part of your situation can really start to sparkle. But if you are feeling that in a relationship situation, things have got a little bit cramped, or you're feeling around a job that there's too many expectations, because Saturn and Neptune are squaring up with Jupiter in a more escapist part of your situation, it could be part of you that does want to actually break free of all sorts of constraints and be more of a free spirit. But if you can do it with some other people, the things you have in common can certainly be the things you celebrate over the next 6 weeks, whether it's supporting a sports team, whether it's playing in a group of people, whether it's a shared interest. Those things can really bring you together in a very positive way. So if you were going away on some kind of trip with people that you're closely associated with, it could turn out to be a lot of fun over the next few weeks. But if you are in a situation where you do feel that your room to flex is somewhat limited, what Mars in the sign of Virgo can help you to do is to think more about your long term. As much as we can all make rather impulsive decisions, particularly with Mars, I think in this part of your chart, in terms of his journey, especially as he's been emphasizing your need for recognition for quite a lot of the last 6 months, now I feel that may be something that's still important to you, but I think you can think beyond that. It's not just the role, the status, the money, it's about what it means to you and the people that you're connected within that. So your longer term thinking can clarify quite a lot over the next 6 weeks. Sagittarius, Mars moving through your sister fire sign of Leo, and particularly through the second decan of the sign, which is subruled by your ruler Jupiter, has been an interesting, very interesting experience, because you also concurrent to that had Saturn through to the end of May in the very inward 4th house. How did that work out? But once the solar eclipse occurred at the end of March in the sign of Aries, that gave you a little bit more desire to be a freer spirit and push through, break out of some of those more home and emotional dimensions. But I feel that Mars now moving into Virgo could have seen you more recently thinking a lot more about how you can use the desire for change around your professional situation. So if you are wanting to take that next step up, take on more responsibility, achieve more acclaim, be more assertive and self-confident in terms of leading up whatever you're doing, the next 6 weeks is one heck of a celestial window of opportunity. Definitely a chance to push through. And because Jupiter, your ruler, is aligning with Mars in the part of your chart to do with long-term finance, to be joined by the Sun, if you are a natural entrepreneur, perhaps you've used Mars in Leo to investigate different options. Even if you're not going to act on all of them, just exploring those avenues has probably enriched you. And as usual, you will have been gathering a lot of data and information because you have a penchant for knowledge. Now you can turn all of those experiences since Mars first made its way into Leo to take the next step forwards, but in a more worldly application. So Mars in the 10th house could see you coming into contact with some very influential people in the weeks ahead. Now, Mars in Capricorn is exalted, so that's a bit different when it's going through a house, but the host Virgo is about industry, it is about being very attentive to details, something that can bore you at times, but if you can meld that together with your ambition and hard work and drive, there really is something for you to go for. Capricorn, you have a reputation for industry, but also for convention, which I don't feel is completely justified. You could have planets, personal planets in Aquarius, for example, or in the sign of Sagittarius. So not all Capricorns are necessarily quite as adhered to the orthodox as is the archetype. And of course Uranus has been in a dazzling part of your situation for 7 years, pushing and provoking you to be a bit more daring. But it is possible that with Mars making its way through the signs of Cancer and Leo, your relationship situation and perhaps your love life have been very much to the fore. Now, if things are really going well with a particular alliance, it could go from strength to strength, particularly when the Sun returns to Cancer with the solstice and links with Jupiter, the planet of fortune. But it has to be working because your ruler Saturn and the dreamy Neptune are going to be squaring up to both. And even when Mars moves, they're still activating a link to Mars in the 9th house of your situation, which can be very much to do with variety, spontaneity, independence and travel. But if a relationship is going well and feels right, you're probably going to go on a holiday together over the next 6 weeks. But if a relationship isn't going so well, the next 6 weeks could see you want to seek your liberty. I'm sorry if that seems a little bit direct and to the point. No one's going to leave your life who's truly right for you. But what will happen with Mars going into Virgo is that part of you that can be very committed and really want to make things work. That's your nature. You can really be applied. But sometimes, however much we give effort and energy and sincerity to a situation, if it's not meant to be, then we need to let go. So Mars in the 9th house is asking you to bring or let go of anything that's too rigid. So if you want to be a bit freer, whether it's around your work, where you work, if you consider working further afield, a job that's traveling, even overseas, that could be something that captures your imagination. But most of all, with the Sun joining Jupiter in your 7th house, you're going to want to make some meaningful connections. And if you can't get those connections, that's when you're going to want greater personal freedom and independence. Aquarius, Mars moving into Virgo, is more reflective of the scorpionic rulership that Mars has. It's deep, it's intense, it's passionate, and can be transformational. The host, Virgo, can be very penetrative, very much about drilling down into the micro detail. Now, many Aquarius people have a gift for psychology, and if you're interested, you could find that that's really ignited over this next 6 weeks. But also the 8th house can be about things like shared finance, business, entrepreneurship, things like pensions, savings, shares, wills, legacies. It's deep stuff, but it is stuff that needs to be taken seriously. Now, Mars obviously creates an impulse. So the sign of Virgo is about the detail, and Mars is more about the urgency. But there's a third area. Mars in the 8th house can be about sex. If there's someone that you're drawn to, and you're drawn to in a productive way, the chances are there can be a greater sense of desire that is around the relationship if it's reciprocated. But because Jupiter, the planet of growth and opportunity, has just moved into Cancer, which is 6th house for you, so a bit Virgoan, if you can combine the two areas, then this could be an opportunity to transform your situation extremely productively. So an attention to detail but an open-mindedness can be good for your long-term finances. If you're open to a relationship, it may be someone you work with, Virgo and the 6th house. If you're in a relationship where you're feeling a bit blocked or inhibited around the intimate side of things, it may be something that does need to be talked through. And with Saturn now in your 3rd house, along with the more subtle energies of Neptune, it is going to be important that you don't get exasperated if things aren't quite going as you want. Patience will be very valuable through this period. But essentially, if you're single and you're really wanting to bring a greater sense of excitement into your world, I just feel that it may be in the most ordinary or mundane situations that you could bump into someone and start having quite an animated conversation. The supermarket queue, the train station, it may be at the gym. These are the areas where just innocent little chats can suddenly see that exchange of energy which can spark something off that's quite profound. And Mars in the 8th house is something that can be very exciting indeed. Pisces, Mars moving into your 7th house, has lots of upsides. First of all, it can give you a spark. If you're wanting to connect to the world in general, you're going to have more confidence to set your boundaries. If you do work in a fast-moving, somewhat competitive environment, you'll be up for it much more. It may be that you enjoy some kind of sport where you have a direct opponent, like tennis, squash, badminton. Mars will help with that too. But Mars in the 7th house in a natal chart between two people can bring in a little bit of feistiness. Not necessarily a bad thing, but for you, because Jupiter, your traditional ruler, is linking to Mars so productively and is going to be joined by the Sun in the most golden part of your chart, lighten up your year from the 21st with the summer solstice. If you do want to venture out, be more social, interact with people, but at the same time let people know what you will or will not accept, you have the perfect mix. So I think you're entering a time when you can feel a lot more attractive, a lot more aware of what you have to offer, but also clearer about what you won't accept. That's what Mars is going to help you with. Now, Saturn in your sign over the last couple of years, depending on your personal planets, because of the retrogrades it goes through, it may have had quite the impact on your personal energy or even your sense of confidence. Know that Mars in this area can help you a lot, but particularly being supported by Jupiter, then the Sun, but also the new moon that's coming in Cancer soon too. Thank you so much for joining me for this Mars Deep Dive special. Please like, comment or subscribe to the channel, and please check out my fabulous new website at patrickarundell.com.